Welcome, everybody, to Navigating Change, the podcast from Tybal Inc. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here with the herald of higher education, Howard Tybal.
You know, I feel like I'm a young Frankenstein. I should turn around.
Putting on the Reds!
No, not that scene when he says, "Hey, handsome," and the monster turns around because who are you talking about? Harold? What are these? How long do you prepare these introductions about me?
That was so good. I'll tell you, it's because I'm inspired by all the late night hoopla. Did you watch Dave Letterman's last thing? It was a while ago now, but man, it was so good. It was so good. So every introduction, I'm trying to be, I'm trying to be your Paul Schaefer.
You are Paul Schaefer.
I miss those guys.
With the hair. And you should see the hair this guy has. He's got some hair.
I grow hair like a Wookiee. That's the truth.
All right.
I am very excited about our show today, Howard. We are talking about we're talking about bottlenecks in implementation. It's kind of a spiritual follow-up to a conversation we had just a few weeks back. The danger of thinking in projects. It was episode 101. And we have an expert with us to share the load of this conversation with keen experience in rolling out large institutional installations. But before we get to that, find out more about Navigating Change at tybalinc.com, where you can subscribe to the show for free in iTunes. There's a link that'll take you right over there. You can subscribe to our mailing list and get updates when we post new shows, or, of course, your podcast app of choice, and join the conversation on Twitter or LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. All of that you can find at tybalinc.com. So, joining us for the show this week, we have this very special guest, Brian Sweeney. Brian is the head of U.S. operations for Unimarket, providing e-procurement solutions to higher ed institutions around the world. For this episode, we're coming to you from the U.S., but we carry great shame in that, as we should be having this conversation in Unimarket's New Zealand offices and sharing a proper beverage. Somehow we will try to make do. We've been trying to get Brian on the show for some time now. It's about time. Brian Sweeney, welcome to Navigating Change.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm definitely looking forward to being here.
Excellent. So we're talking about if we're going to follow up to this conversation we had on the danger of thinking in projects, how do we make that transition, Howard? How do you make this a part two?
Well, I think that Brian's going to probably have a lot to say about that, because I know that Brian and I talked about that offline, this idea about project thinking has this mindset that you come in, you put all this energy together, and then you step away, and then sometimes you wonder why the success we're looking for or the return on investment that we're looking for doesn't have the same momentum that we have when we so focus on projects. But there's a dual edge here, because we do have day jobs, and it's important to say we're going to dedicate a period of time to be able to do X, Y, or Z. In this case, the work that Unimarket is doing is really providing creative and innovative solutions around procurement. So what I think Brian's bringing is a very deep awareness from the work that they do every single day of the challenge of not just having a great tool, but having a way of thinking about helping a school, a university, a college integrate this into their culture. And I think that's the heart of any of these technical implementations, is how do you both set the right expectations about what it's going to take to have this be perceived campus-wide as a success, but at the same time, build some positive momentum around the change. I think it's a dual-edged challenge. I think you have to think this way, but I think there's also a downside in thinking about something just as a project. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's within a specific e-procurement implementation, there are a lot of different projects, but the overall success factors really are measured by the rollout and how successful you actually collaborate with your suppliers and your vendors to bring them on board, how your users take on the new tool that they have, how you introduce that new tool, and what you measured at the very beginning before you had this e-procurement solution a year out, and the legacy that you were talking about on the dangers of thinking in projects and how it doesn't necessarily end with the tool being live. You have to be looking at it from a standpoint of it's going to be growing year on year after you actually implement it and roll it out.
You know, I've been familiar and working closely with Unimarket for a couple of years now, so I'm fairly familiar with what you guys do that is unique around e-procurement. Why don't you just take a minute and talk about that so that people listening to this get a sense of what Unimarket is and what you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. The difference that Unimarket really has in the market is started from our founder, Scott Blackwood, who was a partner with Ernst & Young and really focused on change management implementations, ERP implementations, and he realized that the projects and how e-procurement needed to work, not only just in the cloud and how the technology needed to be structured for a multi-tenant software as a service type of system for this to be successful, it was also a shared burden, shared success type of model, where you have the communities and the customers and the higher education campuses on one side and the suppliers and their vendors on the other side. And they already have a fairly loose partnership. But once you are creating an electronic marketplace, you really can strengthen that with CXML integrations, punch-outs, online catalogs, electronic invoicing, electronic bidding processes, and contract management. When you have a lot of those tools and the really strong partnerships with those suppliers, if you can deliver that in a great way, you're both going to be very successful. You're both going to have a strong return on investment and strong efficiencies that you'll be gaining from that. Our business model was built around that idea that if the customer is not successful, the supplier won't be successful. If the supplier is not successful, we should not be successful. If all three parties are successful, we're all going to be prospering and doing what we are supposed to and delivering the return on investment for everyone. The key factors in our operational makeup are really that we have account management support and supplier account management or supplier relations built into our operational day-to-day process. So after the implementation, after the project per se, or the success journey is really kicked off because you have a new delivered solution that is going to do all these great things for you and create all these efficiencies. Once you have that, the account management and the supplier adoption and supplier relations team really guide you through that journey and have monthly calls and are really incentivized and motivated to make you successful. If you're not successful, the suppliers aren't successful and we're not successful. So that's a key tenets of our operation.
There's always a series of things that are both challenges and sometimes opportunities, but it really often comes down to a much smaller set of things that if we get right, it really makes something be a good implementation to a great implementation. And I think we would all agree on the show today that having the right team leading this is important, right? And having the right internal leadership team when you come in and you're working with them is important. Communication, we can talk about that, but I think no one's going to argue with how important communication is in getting that right. Data integration, all of that, and working with them. The piece that I find most challenging with any technical implementation is around business process. And I'd like us to talk about that a little bit, because I can tell you that from my perspective, the challenge is, a company like Unimarket comes in, the institution is looking to do this in as cost-effective way as possible. There's this, historical concept called, we want to do vanilla, which fundamentally means keep our costs down. But then inevitably what ends up happening is we end up designing a system often that replaces the old one, but we don't change our business practices. And even if we do put an effort into this, I often find it to be insufficient. Now, I think maybe, and I'm curious in your take about this, both yourself, Brian, and Pete, it seems to me what we have to do is set the right expectations about what are the business processes we need to change now and make room for longer term changes over time. And that's the right expectation to have, as opposed to an all or nothing. We didn't change any business processes. We have a new system. It's easier to use, but we're still doing it the same way. Or we get buried in business process change that takes the project and makes it 3 times the length. So how do you navigate that with your customers?
And that really is the one of the biggest challenges, but also with any challenge, you have room for great successes as well. And when you have that strong leadership team that challenges you and challenges their project team to recognize those opportunities, you really are set up for success. With a lot of the business processes, some of the really minute and specific details, something I think I learned from you, Howard, is make sure you're asking the question why at least 5 times. You will eventually find that there's an opening there for an improvement, an opening for a way to do things a little bit differently and to bring in the new efficiencies and the new tools that you have. A lot of our customers are either coming from a straight paper-based requisition through to PO, paper invoice coming back process, and they try to recreate that exactly as is because that's the comfortable thing to do. That's what everybody knows. There's often many opportunities for improvement around the approval process. The small dollar, high volume transactions is really what everybody thinks about when they think e-procurement, but it's the whole picture. It's every transaction going through the system. So thinking about it not only in this small dollar, large transaction numbers, which are the biggest opportunity, but everything else, all the other purchases that are going on. If you can structure the approval process, the different configurations of the site and the system to make it work for an electronic process and get your head wrapped around that, rather than trying to take it through the paper process from beginning to end. We obviously want to understand that paper process in its entirety so that we can dig into those little pieces and ask why and see whether improvements are available.
This idea of making this transition from paper-based processes and these processes that can really become, heavily entrenched, and getting a culture to buy in around doing it this new way. That is, in my experience, where we see most of that cultural conflict, right? Where this new ideology comes in to supplant an old ideology, and there is very little that we have sort of to say about it, apart from the fact that it's going to improve things somehow. How do you approach that from a cultural perspective? I mean, I get that, Howard's point that you ably brought up, Brian, be asking why and encourage others to ask why. How do you take it to that next level of not just, here it is, it's going to be great, but you're going to love it?
Absolutely. And that's where really communication and letting the campus-wide users know, as well as the leadership, that they're doing it for a reason. It's to improve their life and their efficiencies. Yeah. It's to improve the campus. It's ultimately to save money, which is really where a lot of campuses are looking at. They know that they're always being looked at in the media for higher tuition. They are really trying to lower those tuitions. So keeping the money from going out so quickly is a great way to do that.
See, what's interesting, Brian? I want to chime in so that we can continue to on this thread that Pete raised, that you just spoke to too, which is, Pete's last comment was so that we love it, or that they love it. And I think that is the right mindset, especially with faculty, is that faculty have to be front and center. How is this going to affect the nature of how they work? And that has to be taken into account. But here's my problem. I think what we do on these projects is that we lie to people. And what we say to them, this is going to be good for you. And and I know why we do it. We do it because we want to build some momentum around these projects. But I've recently been in front of large groups, and more I've been articulating this message that we have to be honest with people on the front end around these implementations by saying, this will not necessarily make your job easier, at least on the front end, at least in the first 6 months or a year. Over time, it might make your job easier. This is right for the institution. This is why we're doing it. But the change that you're going to go through is going to be, in some cases, hard, because change is hard, because it requires us learning new things. That's okay. We will help you along the way. But I don't think we say that. I think what we say instead is, this is going to be great for you. Let me show you a demo version of this tool. It looks slick. It looks great. And then when they have to actually use it in real time, people are deeply disappointed. And, I have yet to see, and this is not, I think this is the inherent challenge of any technical implementation, big or small, is how do you find that right balance of being honest in the front end, so that but that you don't kill your project, right? So how do you manage expectations, or when you think about those engagements that went well, how did you manage the expectations on the front end so that people felt like you were being honest with them around the challenges through this?
Yeah, it's a very true statement that we always want to make it nice and pretty on the outside, but when you get down into it, you want to be honest and set the expectations that it is going to be some work. It can be done quickly, depending on your availability. It can be done in certain ways, but ultimately there is going to be change management and some pain points for certain users. Delivering a message, which I think is something you've said many times, is with a balance of opportunity and risk, or opportunity and crisis.
And the brutal facts, or those combinations. Yes,
absolutely. So understanding where the crisis is, or the challenges are going to be, and how they are opportunities to actually improve it. We generally like to do that in the very beginning of the project. So even in the sales aspect, they're always talking about the implementation. A lot of RFPs that we're seeing now, people are paying a lot of attention to the implementation. They want to know the plan, the resources that they'll need. But in the very beginning of the air quotes project, there is the kind of, as Daniel, one of our sales guys, like to say, the sharpening of the axe before you cut down the tree. That's very important to understand what the pre-kickoff is going to be like. So going through a pre-kickoff workshop of understanding what their scope is, what their success is going to look like in the end, how you're going to get there, and then what the pain points may be to address.
Yeah, because as a faculty, what I just heard was the sharpening the axe before you cut off my arms. When you're on the implemented side of that conversation.
So let me ask you this. E-procurement's been around for a while, and it's clearly gotten more sophisticated, especially since it's moved into the clouds. How have you found that e-procurement has evolved? So what is the nature of how e-procurement is being rolled out today? And would you say that there is an equal amount of receptivity as there was? Is it growing? How are you finding that the nature of integrating these in has changed over time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's also a generational thing as well, where there's a lot of new people coming into the workforce that almost demand a better way to do this in an electronic way, where you have some of the older staff on their way out that may never have used a computer as part of their day-to-day work process. So the implementation is a bit tricky, and the rollout is a bit tricky. For each customer is a bit different. You have to know your culture. You have to know your champions and who can actually spread the word almost virally. Kind of go back to the before social media, where you can get some of those people that are going to be either the biggest champions of the system or the biggest challengers of the system. And if you can win over some of those challengers, they will be your biggest promoters. And if they can promote before you even introduce the new tool, a lot of people will be craving it and beating down your door almost to get the new tool, get the new hands on it.
Yeah, this question of advocates is I think a big one, and I think it's important to at least recognize being able to transition the argument, or even transition this process of asking why. If you can get your customers to ask why on your behalf, you've sort of made half the sale, which I think it's an important sort of milestone in that cultural transformation. Can you share with us an example of some examples of the kinds of pushback you get from institutions? Do you have an example of an institution rollout that is particularly illustrative of these challenges and opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. There's always, within every implementation, there's good and bad. A lot of times the bad, if it's in a certain area, can be even worse. I've seen a few chicken and egg type of scenarios where the IT resources are limited, as they are usually, but they essentially need a very good reason to work on this project, and they say unless people are using it, we can't integrate it. And then the users and the business offices are saying, well, we can't, our users don't want to use it because it's not integrated. They're having to do double entry. So there's a lot of challenges around that. And that's where leadership can really come in and say, this is what we want to have happen, and this is the time we want it to be done in. Other challenges from the individual users are generally going to be a lot of fear. Often they fear it's going to take over their positions, take over their jobs. Some of the successes I've really seen is repurposing of some of those positions that people may have been fearful, and they come to their managers or their directors to say, I think this is going to put me out of a job. And they say, well, no, this is going to give you an opportunity to expand your horizons and move up to something a little bit different, where we're thinking more strategically than tactically. We don't want you to be a paper pusher and somebody who's just processing these requests. We want you to be somebody who recognizes these requests and can maybe start negotiating with suppliers on better terms, or managing some of these partnerships internally that we really need to have in our pockets.
We were just talking about this, Pete, when we were having the conversation about shared services.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
right? And the idea that if you are whether you're a faculty or administrative, you've got people that support you, and you develop a certain level of loyalty, and maybe you've worked with them for 10, 20 years. They have a certain skill set, they've got a certain role, and next thing you know, you're giving them something that would require that they learn something at a level that would change their job. That maybe they spend half their time on procurement type functions, and this would cut it down to a quarter. Well, what do you do with the rest of that time? And I think the inevitable question for institutions is the willingness to say, for some of us, this is going to be a great opportunity to take the next step in your career here. For some of you, you've got a choice to make. Do you want to be part of that change? Because if you're not, I mean, it's interesting. It's not a criticism if somebody says they're not up to something. I'm thinking that more and more these days. But we're so careful about not wanting to sort of offend people who might not want to do this. When in fact, it actually might be the case that some of us, these changes that are coming to higher technology changes, that where you are in your career and what you're doing, you're no longer interested in that level of learning, and that's not bad. And instead, what we do is we try and talk around that conversation, or we think that somehow we've got the change agents and the people who are comfortable, and then we've got the others who there's something wrong with them. And in fact, it could be very, very much be just that they're not up for that. And if that's the case, it's a conversation that needs to happen, because then you can help that person figure out what they do want to do. And we need to have that conversation more. There's that side of it. And then, from the other side of this too, is that I think sometimes people that have people that report to them protect their people from these kinds of changes, because they anticipate that maybe their staff will have a hard time with integrating it. And I think that's another dynamic that plays out. That's why, Brian, I think you're absolutely right. We've got to show them that the transition is going to be change, but we're going to help you along the way. And to the extent that you can help, Unimarket or they have an internal team that helps with change or training, that you find a way to handhold people in that initial transition, so they realize it's not as bad as they thought it was going to be. But in some ways, you have to lower the bar. You have to say, because it's change, because it's going to be different, because it will be glitchy up front. I mean, that's the other piece of it too, Brian. When have you ever seen an implementation, a technical one, going smoothly with no technical issues? Zero, right? Oh no, but I know what you're about to say. All the other implementations, exactly. When we implement, it goes in smoothly. That's the right answer, right?
There's the honest truth is there's always going to be either process glitches, technical glitches, or personality glitches, even that they're going to affect the project and keep it from moving forward. And recognizing those early, having a pilot group type of process at the very beginning of technical go live is often used, and is often used to find those types of glitches.
There's ways to minimize it. That's I think your point is that you have processes to minimize this, and that's fantastic. I think the important thing is
I would add to that. Sorry, Howard, but one other thing I would add to that is something I always like to tell the customers up front is being able to see into the past and see into the future is one of your best tools. And it sounds pretty far-fetched, but if you can essentially see into the future by leveraging other customers who have done the same thing, leveraging people who actually have done similar projects and finding out their pitfalls and how they navigated it, and if they can lay out a map for you for what you're about the journey you're about to go on, it's immensely helpful for you to.
Which is actually a nice transition. That, the past and the future. Why don't you talk for a minute about your Unimarket Now conference in October? Give you a chance to say if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Look at you doing the transitions, Howard. Well done.
And the plugs. That's
great. See? Pretty soon, Pete, they'll be like, Pete who? Now, that's never going to happen. Ever.
I think he's the fan favorite, so you can't get rid of him at this point.
Ooh, that's good. Yeah. That's nice.
Yeah, the user group Unimarket Now conference is going to be October 19th to the 21st in Chicago, Illinois this winter, or this fall. And it's an opportunity for a lot of the users and the suppliers, because they are a key part of the whole process as well, to get together and define kind of an agenda and discussion points, and really collaboration, because collaboration is in our tagline of our company, collaborative procurement. We want them to be talking. We want there to be open discussions. We want there to be feedback about the process and the product that we are working with, all of us in the same room at once, because our development team actually comes up, our CIO, our product manager comes up from New Zealand. They engage with the customers and the suppliers in a lot of different discussions. They show off what we've done in the past year, what we're going to be doing in the coming year, and we take a lot of feedback. There's a lot of discussions that Howard know. He was the keynote speaker for us last year. He did an excellent job at the very beginning, the very first day. He took over the first day and really energized the user group and a lot of the suppliers as well, to understand that they're not the only ones having those challenges, and the different ways to actually manage and navigate the change.
I love that you said that, because there are a lot of ways you can end a sentence that starts with Howard really took over the conference.
What I do want to add to your comment about the conference, Brian, was that I was very much impressed with how Unimarket as an organization really does treat this as a partnership and knows how to leverage individuals who have been through it. And you really have, it's almost like a learning mindset. At the conference, you had people there that have been through it so they could share their experiences and their successes and their challenges. And you had new people who were considering it. So just the very fact that how you conduct that conference really showed me how you think of how much importance you put on helping an institution think about this in a holistic way. So I was very excited to be part of it, and hoping to do it again with you this year.
Well, that was what I was going to. Are you on the docket this year, Howard? Are we making a commitment on behalf of Brian?
It's in my calendar, and Brian and I still need to talk about it. But yeah, I think we're looking to build off what we did last year. So we got some details we got to work out. But yeah, it's I'm really excited about potentially doing it again, and in the fair city of Chicago, the Windy City.
Did you like how Brian said it's in Chicago this winter? I mean, fall.
Hey, that was some of the concerns. Yeah,
I could believe it. When so it's October 19th through 21st in Chicago. When do you have is there a website up that you can send people to?
Yes, it's on the events page of the Unimarket website. So if you go to unimarket.com/events, or from the horizontal navigation toward the right, there's an events page.
Excellent. All right. So head over to events at unimarket.com. A lot of great customer stories over there. You can hear kind of how Unimarket really works with partner institutions to roll out this e-procurement solution. There's some really interesting stories on there. So I encourage you to do that. Brian Sweeney, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you.
I hope it was worth your time.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, friend of the show, you are welcome back anytime. Brian, thanks for joining us. On behalf of Howard Tybal and Brian Sweeney, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll catch you next week on Navigating Change, the podcast from Tybal Inc.